judge or jury? That has been a controversial issue in Taiwan's continued judicial reform for decades. And which is a better system that suits today's Taiwan? We'll find out on today's program as we have a discussion with Mr. Huang, who's currently the managing partner of Lionheart Attorneys at Law in Taipei. Welcome to our program, Leon.
Thank you, sir. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, just call me Raymond. And Leon, by the way, first off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? For example, where you went to school and what have you been doing in the past, all the way up to now?
So it's my pleasure. I was educated in the United States, New York University, for my bachelor's degree in psychology and political science. And then I went on to another university for law degree, and then I received my law degree from Dongwu University, Suzhou University in Taipei.
All right.
And now I'm currently in National Taiwan University's grad school of psychology doing my doctoral program.
Really?
So I'm half a psychologist, probably you can say that.
Okay, but that's heavy-duty stuff. You have a full-time job and then studying for your doctorate.
Yeah, but very interesting. I think psychology somehow, it's working really well with what I'm doing right now.
All right.
Yeah.
And Leon, I have some numbers here with me. According to a recent survey by the National Zhongzhen University, nearly 84% of the respondents in Taiwan do not really trust judges in Taiwan. And close to 80% of the respondents did not really think that the prosecutors are impartial. Why are the numbers so high? And there's such a degree of mistrust from the people of Taiwan towards the judicial system in Taiwan.
I think that's a very good question. I've actually heard about that question myself, and the statistics.
Okay.
I think there is indeed a sense of, mistrust in Taiwan from ordinary people toward those who work in the judicial community.
Okay.
And I do believe that this is not just a problem of judges or prosecutors or lawyers. From my personal experience, it is my perception that most of the judges, prosecutors, and lawyers are working very hard. So for that degree of mistrust, I would probably argue that the problem is with the lack of knowledge or the lack of understanding to our legal system, to the actual practice of the law.
Okay.
So in short, I think there is somehow a systemic failure in our legal education. Overall legal education, and for lay people's education. That's what I think.
All right, and Leon, for the last few decades, judicial reform has always been a top priority, no matter who is the ruling party in Taiwan. And despite all the efforts at the judicial reform, we have seen some changes. For example, making judges a little more accountable for their decisions. But how come that sense of mistrust is still very prevalent in today's Taiwan? For example, people say that if you're rich in Taiwan and you get in trouble with the law, then you're probably going to, in the end, you're going to walk. But if you're not rich, you're one of the ordinary people or even, living in very impoverished conditions, then you may need to face the severity to the fullest extent of the law. What do you think?
I think justice never comes easy, and it never comes fast. And let's begin with the first thing that we're just talking about, because you're just saying that in the past decades, probably there has been some efforts made toward a more full spectrum type of judicial reform. But pardon me if my language sounds a bit harsh. I don't really think any of the governments were trying really hard to implement the reform. I mean, there is a National Judicial Reform Conference since year 1999. And, over 20 more conclusions were made, and almost none of those were implemented significantly until this moment. And it's been 16 years, or actually 17 years already. So with this new government now in place, we do believe that this is a better timing for actual judicial reform to be in place. Right. So if judicial reform is somehow made possible in this term of President Tsai Ing-wen's latest term, or probably if there's a next term, then I think there's still hope.
All right.
Right.
And Leon, you know very well that you and I both study law in the United States, which is common law tradition.
That's right.
But Taiwan is, of course, a different, it's of the continental tradition.
That's right.
And so we have very powerful judges and very, effective prosecutors in terms of arguing the law, and subsequently the role of the lawyers may be somewhat diminished compared to the common law system. But a lot of people have been arguing the continental system that's being inherited from Europe may not be applicable to the, today's Taiwan. What do you think? Do you think the current system may be out of date, out of touch, and doesn't suit Taiwan very well?
Well, I think that's, again, a very good question. I think it's a really deep question, and I like to answer that question with two parts apart.
Please.
First of all, personally, I don't believe any system is probably out of date or simply bad, because I think, every system has its cultural background, has its own historical backgrounds, and etc. So it is true that while Taiwanese system is adopted after the one from continental Europe, for example, mostly German.
Yes.
But in recent years or recent decades, each major amendment or revision of the law involves a lot of legal concepts from the United States or from England or from other countries. So I think when we're talking about implementing a new system or trying out with a new system, probably the focus is what best suits Taiwan at the current stage.
Exactly.
So that leads us to the second part of your question. So, without judging which system is actually better, I would like to argue that given the current conditions of Taiwan's judicial reform and its needs, I would say that the United States system, which is the jury system, it's probably going to be able to make much of a reform in comparison with that of the German system. Yeah, because, well, once you implement the jury system, judges would have to jump out of its old roles as a sort of a Bao Qing-tian style. Mr. Knows All. He sees all. He judges everything. He's omnipotent, right?
Yes.
That's the traditional role type of judges. But once you go into the jury system, there you have a seemingly fairer, a little bit fairer system where you have a triangle, where you have the judge sitting alongside the jury, trying to determine those facts which may be applicable in a single case. And then you can probably see lawyers actually taking up their duties arguing against prosecutors. So that there you have everyone playing their role. Instead of in the current system, the judge is playing the prosecutor's role, the prosecution is playing the judge's role. And like you said, the defense is usually very weak.
And that's very diminished.
Very diminished. And that probably has to do with the community opinion with the defense attorneys.
All right. And one of the topics that has been under discussion for decades is whether Taiwan can implement a jury trial system or have a lay assessor in the court. And can you first, Leon, tell us what is the difference between a lay assessor and the jury system?
Okay, well, those are all good questions today. I think the lay assessor or the lay judge system actually is from German. It has its origin in German. And basically, so-called lay assessor or lay judges are, where you actually draft a bunch of people, mostly middle class. And based on the law, you select a bunch of those people to be the lay judges, where they have to serve a definite term. For example, 3 to 5 years in German, right? And these people, during that period of time, they sit alongside the professional judge, and they hear the case together, they determine the facts together, and they do the sentencing together. In short, they sit together on every applicable cases. So they determine things together. Whereas in jury systems, that is coming from, say, the United States or or England, right? The jurors are the fact finders. They determine which facts are applicable or useful to them in the case.
Yes.
And then they determine, whether the crime stands or not.
Okay.
That is offered by the prosecution as charged. And then the judge is seemingly a more neutral, unbiased role of, procedural referee. And then where you have the prosecution and defense fighting against each other. That's the essence of adversary system.
Okay.
So there is, I think in short, I think the most significant difference is that the distance between the lay judge or the juror and the professional judge. In the German system, the distance is really close.
Yes.
So potential influence is probably in place, something that we cannot neglect. But in jury systems, I mean, jurors get to deliberate separately, secretly, and they are shielded from any undue influence from the judge. So they get to make decisions on their own.
All right. Yeah. And Leon, the final question I have for this part of the program is, if we implement a jury system in Taiwan, has been going on for decades and centuries in the United States,
yes,
will you think that will become, possibly a legal version of populism in Taiwan?
Oh, that's an excellent question.
Please.
There is always a risk.
All right.
I have to admit that, there is no perfect system. Jury system has its own issues, its own problems, right?
Okay.
But the problem of turning a jury trial into populism is somehow going to be minimized if we do actually take care of all the peripheral issues of the jury system.
For example?
For example, we're going to need a better discovery system in terms of evidence.
All right.
We're going to need a new set of evidence rules.
All right.
We're going to need better trainings with prosecution and defense attorneys.
Yes.
Right? So I think that's a really good question, and that's why I thought, if we instate this jury system in place, then you can implement the changes we actually want to make.
All right. Yeah. Let me ask you, so far, there's been decades of discussions over the needed judicial reforms for Taiwan. Yeah. And I agree with you. There's been probably not much progress that we have seen so far. Therefore, the public confidence in the judicial system in Taiwan has remained at a very low level. And therefore, I want to ask you, what are the challenges or forces of resistance to implementing some of the changes that we have discussed, whether it's a lay judge or, a jury trial system in Taiwan?
Well, I think one of the most important resistances is actually coming from the judicial community.
Yes.
While most of the practitioners in the judicial community, be them judges, prosecutors, or defense attorneys, while they work really hard, it's always difficult to bring sunshine and transparency into a very, very professional and highly closed-down system.
Precisely.
And I'm not saying that there's any scandal or anything bad happening. I'm just saying that, it's not easy for those professionals, or known as elites, to jump out of their comfort zone and starting to accept the fact that what they do in court have to be subject to the scrutiny of the people, have to be viewed or reviewed by the people. And that is something that's going to, it's going to be difficult.
Yes.
It's a mentality kind of thing.
Exactly.
Right.
And therefore, we have seen in recent years a lot of the judgments that were handed down by judges, and they really caused a lot of public uproar, because the judges handed down decisions that were almost completely contrary to public expectations or sentiments on the case. What do you think about the term that we have come up with in Taiwan, calling those judges the Dinosaur Judges? And it's not something, of course, those in the judicial community anticipated, but what do you think about that term?
Frankly, I'm not a judge,
no,
and I don't see myself becoming one in any recent future.
All right.
But frankly, as someone who's going to court a lot, I don't think there's a fair name to call the judges.
Right.
From the judges I know, I would argue that 95% of the judges work very hard. They sacrifice their family life. they sacrifice their holidays, and the pay is not really that much. I mean, they work like 12, 14 hours per day, right? And I think the criticism coming from, while I understand the criticism coming from, ordinary people, that's understandable.
Okay.
I'm sympathetic with the judge's position currently. And I think the huge gap is taking place because of the ignorance. I don't mean ignorance to be in a bad way. I don't mean, I don't mean to accuse someone of being stupid. No. I mean ignorance as in lack of knowledge. People do not understand what judges are doing. People do not understand where judges are coming from in their judgments. They do not understand why their hands are tied up when they have to make certain judgments.
All right.
And judges, of course, they act independently in accordance with the law.
All right.
But while most of the people do not understand the essence of the law, judges often get misunderstood. And I think that's what happened.
All right.
Yeah.
And we also touched upon this briefly in the earlier part of the program, is what is so-called, judgment or court trials by public opinion or by media. As you know, Taiwan is now full-fledged a democracy.
Yes.
And we have a very animated, very active media. You see talk shows every night on TV. And so you have a lot of issues that are easily becoming topics of public debate and discussion. And a lot of times, emotions were drawn into the discussion. So making the, discussion very difficult to be impartial and also fact-based. So what do you think if we continue, having a bigger involvement and participation by citizens? Will we run the risk of possibly one day we will have trial by media or by public opinion?
That's a great question. Trial by public opinion has always been a very dangerous thing. I mean, freedom of speech is beautiful, but then everything has its upside and downside. And while we want to uphold the fundamental ideas of freedom of speech in a democracy, we would also have to look at the risks, the downsides with a kind of correct attitude, which is that uninhibited or type of speech without going into in-depth fact-finding, like what you said, without being impartial, can be jeopardizing everybody's belief and can be arousing more, unnecessary arguments in the society. And I think you just pointed out two of the major problems that, most of the media are probably having at this moment. Number one is not being impartial. Number two, they do not do research. So most of the discussions are, I'm sorry to say that, shallow, surfaced. And most of the discussions are based on emotions. Why do they do that? I think it's quite obvious. They need the rate, they need people to tune into the show and watch and curse with them. So they need to actually provoke more emotional outbursts. That's the thing. And evidence-based or fact-based discussions are very important. So I think if there's anything we can do in terms of judicial reform, I personally believe that a reform with media, or at least to sit down to talk with the media, will be a part of it.
All right. And Leon, I did not learn about this fact until today's, when we started taping, which was that you were the defense attorney for Cheng Chieh, who was a few years ago considered, committed, Taipei Metro massacre by killing a few people and also winning many along the way. And let me ask you, what was the background and reason for you to take the case? Because, it was, the first time ever something like this happened in Taiwan. And the public reaction, as you can imagine, was overwhelming against Cheng Chieh. And for, you to be his defense attorney, there must be a lot of reaction, coming from your peers, coming from people that you work with, and your family, your friends. And how did you deal with, all these different sources of pressure?
Well, The Cheng Chieh case is actually quite the case that actually gives me a lot of pressure. I admitted that. It's also, gives me the opportunity for the first time in my life to actually receive certain death threats,
Really?
which is something that is quite, kind of interesting experience. But nothing bad happened.
Okay.
And I totally believe that people who send those death threats to me, they didn't mean so much harm. They just want an emotional outlet.
Outburst.
And I happen to be that outlet for them to, throw emotional reactions upon. And that case, the reason why I took on that case was actually quite simple. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I only do criminal defense and intellectual property and international cases.
Okay.
I believe it's my duty to take on, the case where it involves, anyone who cannot or will not defend themselves. I mean, it's simply what I have to do.
Okay.
I have a great family. They support me. I mean, my
Terrific.
wife, she didn't say anything. I know that there was pressure, but she didn't say anything, and I appreciate it for that. But most of my peers, they didn't actually give me too much pressure. Well, I know there is certain kind of pressure because I've been accused, of making wrong choices by taking in wrong clients. But I do believe that if I'm to be given this opportunity to have a conversation with them, to sit down and talk about it,
okay,
most of them would understand. And the fact is proven that, once I have an opportunity to talk with them, they do understand.
Okay.
So one of the very important reasons why I took on this case at that moment was because, like I talked with Cheng Chieh before he was executed. At the very beginning, I said, look, this case is not going to be hopeful in Taiwan. It doesn't look good. I do believe in presumption of innocence until proven guilty, and no doubt about that. But I think this case in Taiwan is not going to have a great outcome.
No.
Okay, and death penalty is probable at that moment. But I said, I still believe that, we need to fight because the values of under the Constitution and the value of due process of law is very important. If the courts can grant you an impartial trial and investigate all the evidence, I think it serves two purposes. Number one, it protects the fundamental values of the due process of the law under the Constitution and the Criminal Procedure Act. Right. And number two, it offers a very valuable answer to all the victims and their families because people want to know why. I mean, I want to know why. And frankly, Mr. Cheng, he himself wanted to know why.
Okay.
Yeah. We had a lot of discussion. He had no idea.
Okay. He had no idea why he did what he did.
He knew that he wanted to do that, but when we kept digging deeper. Eventually, I kept asking him why. He could not tell me, and he said, well, he's not too certain about this.
All right. Final question.
Sure.
Was he remorseful at the end?
I think so.
You think so? All right.
I think so because of certain evidences that I've perceived.
Okay.
When someone stops caring about himself in prison and start caring for other people and making sincere apologies to people, I think it's a sign of remorse. Right. But Mr. Cheng has a very unique personality. He doesn't say sorry and he doesn't show emotion easily.
Okay.
He only shows emotion to those who he trusted. Who actually spent time with him.
Throughout that trial, in your many discussions with Cheng Chieh and also the different, proceedings that you went through in the courts, what did you discover as possibly some areas of inadequacy in our judicial system currently? And what would be some of the areas that you would suggest that can be improved upon?
I think there are two major issues that, I've discovered when I came across the case. And it's not just the one with the Cheng Chieh case itself. It's actually, everywhere in criminal cases. But it's especially more prominent with those high-profile cases. I think issue number one is the disregard for due process, especially procedural due process. I regret to say that, in the judgment handed down by the Supreme Court in the Cheng Chieh case, the judge was saying in another way that if the crime is so high, then certain flaws in the process or due process is no longer important. That's essentially what the judgment was talking about, because the court admitted that there were procedural problems, there were procedural flaws. But then the court was saying, well, this guy did something that nobody can tolerate. So those issues were no longer important. We have to put them down. That is something I find very dangerous. You know, think about the Philippines.
Yes.
Think about having a death squad walking down the street, taking law into their own hands and becoming judges themselves with their own discretion. If the judge stops believing in due process of law, it's not easy for me to be convinced that they're going to be defending our Constitution and the fundamental values under the democracy. So that's the first thing. Okay. And it's a huge problem because I see a lot of this kind of attitude in each instance of the trial. District Court, High Court, Supreme Court. You know, I'm not saying all of them. I'm saying some judges are making their discretion and say, well, if this case is so serious, if it's so high profile, then let's set aside due process for a while. It's probably not that much of a concern now. That is some attitude that I cannot live with. This is the first thing.
Of course.
Yeah. And the second thing is having to do with the standards of determining when or how to hand down death penalty.
Okay.
Currently, our courts are using this very interesting standard as, you know, beyond reform.
Right.
That means if somebody is determined by the court to be, you know, beyond reform, it's not reformable, you know, no longer repairable, then he or she should be executed. But the problem is, you know, different judges have very different view on what beyond reform means. And what does that really mean? It's not even a legal concept.
No.
It's not a scientific concept. Basically, nobody knows what it means. And think about that. You know, right now, I understand the fact that we still have death penalty in our country. Yes. I accept it as a fact, no problem. My argument is, if we want to go on and execute people in accordance with the law, due process is so important, we have to actually come up with a definitive, a concrete definition of what beyond reform means. And that is something we don't have right now. And we don't have any agreement among all judges.
No, there's no universal standard on this.
No standard at all. So it's becoming really arbitrary.
Yes.
And it's becoming scary.
Yes.
Because it's depending entirely on luck. I mean, you might get found, you know, sentence of life in prison in this court and death in that court because he finds you with the ability to be reformed and this one finds you not. It's highly scary.
Yes.
Right. So these are the two important issues.
All right. On a more positive or more, you know, encouraging side is that we have, of course, a new administration in office, and President Tsai Ing-wen, ever since, you know, during the campaign, has made it clear that she will want to see judicial reform to continue in Taiwan by having more citizens' participation in the process, which means that she is supportive of implementing one day a jury trial system in Taiwan. So do you think if that, you know, that day comes and becomes a reality, that we have a jury trial system in Taiwan, is that really the right step, a significant step in the right direction in Taiwan's ongoing and continued judicial reform?
Given Taiwan's current circumstances, absolutely. I think implementing the jury system is going to help, and it's going to help a lot. I mean, there's going to be a transition phase where everybody suffers, you know. Judges is going to suffer, they're going to suffer, prosecutors are going to suffer, attorneys are going to suffer because they have to, you know, reset their thinking and their working model.
Yes.
But this is why you want to implement a change. You want to change everything. This is reform, what reform means. My only concern is that while I voted for Ms. Tsai in this issue in the hope of a change, I also have high skepticism of every single politician in office. I tend to observe what they say before they get elected and what they do after they get elected. And I'm concerned a little bit that while talking about implementing jury system in Taiwan, they might probably want to use this only as some sort of a propaganda without actually implementing substantial changes and bring in actual changes in the judicial reform system. The reason I'm saying that is recently because I've been paying close attention to Judicial Yuan, you know, and the head of the Judicial Yuan with regard to their to their actions, to how they perceive this people's participation of trial kind of issue. And it hit me that it seems without any fact-finding process, without any investigation of scientific evidence, that our country seems to have made up its mind to go with a certain system, which is the German system.
All right.
And that is dangerous because scientifically, and I'm saying this because I'm a scientist, scientifically it's proven that there are certain cognitive biases that could be involved in the process of lay judges. Okay. I'm not saying it's all bad.
No.
I'm saying it's probably those cognitive biases is going to take huge toll on our justice system because right now the Taiwan kind of a judicial community and society is not ready for German's lay judge system.
Okay.
The lay judge system is prepared for a highly mature citizen society with high rate of awareness and participation. It's a high degree of respect.
Yes.
Think about one thing. If you are a lay judge sitting alongside of a professional judge for the next 3 years, dare you not speak in dissent in terms of legal decisions or sentencing decisions? Could you speak up your dissenting voice to the judge like, you know what, Your Honor, I don't agree.
Okay.
I'm not an expert, but I do not agree. And you have to, actually hang out with them for the next 3 years.
Yes.
I think it's probably going to be hard in Taiwan. But as a jury system,
so. Yes.
you don't have the problem like that.
All right. But Leon, you are a criminal, attorney.
Yeah.
But what do you think will be the cases in today's Taiwan that are better suited for citizen participation? Criminal cases, civil rights cases, or civil liability cases, or commercial cases? What do you think?
Well, my personal opinion is actually focusing on 2 types of trials.
Okay.
First type would be criminal cases we've just talked about.
Yes.
And the second type would be those cases involving constitution and civil rights.
Okay.
The reason I'm saying that is actually quite obvious and is also evidence-based, because based on investigations and the scientific evidence we have right now, the consistency rate among jury trials and bench trials is over 85%, meaning 85% to 90% of the time, the people is going to be making the same decision as professional judges. So it probably is not so realistic to expect that jury trial is going to be hand out 100% perfect judgment.
No.
Probably not. But the value is that when you introduce people into the trial and let them have the discussion and the debate, examination of the evidence by themselves, they learn things. They become tutors for other ordinary people.
Yes.
We're all aware that there is a great movie in 1956, The 12 Angry Men. I think it's precisely a demonstration of what's going to happen if we introduce jury trial into this country.
All right.
So that's why I think criminal cases and civil rights cases, where both of them have a lot to do with Constitution, is probably the best place where we put the jury system in.
All right. And finally, the final question for this part of the program is, Leon, what do you think, if we have a jury trial system in Taiwan, would that be a very effective way to try to educate the people and also get them exposed to the law? Because you said at the very beginning of the program today that, a lot of people are not aware. They simply are not well-versed in the legal principles and the laws themselves. So do you think jury trial could serve at least partially that purpose?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I do think so. I think the jury trial is going to be a very effective way because based on the research done by Professor Hans, Valerie Hans in Cornell University, in the past decade, it shows that for the citizens who participated in jury trials, the civil awareness and the participation rate is largely increased. And more people started voting, they participated in public forums, they expressed their own thoughts and ideas in public policies, which is a good thing, which is what we need. But I also would like to point out that jury trial, while being effective, it's probably not efficient. It doesn't get things done fast or easily. It spends time, it is costly, That's why we have to limit the use of jury trial with those 2 types of cases.
So primarily, at least at the beginning.
At least in the beginning, yes.
And Leon, we've been talking about the pluses and the minuses of implementing changes in Taiwan, including possibly instituting the lay judge system. And our neighbor, Japan, to the north, has been doing that since 2009. Yeah. They have implemented the lay judge system. Yes. But it's still, even today, 7 years later, a very controversial issue in Japan. Why? And what were some of the voices of discontent over the lay judge system in Japan?
Based on my understanding, I think this lay judge system in Japan implemented since the year 2009, or also it's called the Taiwan system.
All right.
It's actually something that's close to the one that's handed down in German.
Okay.
Where you have those lay judges sitting alongside a professional judge, hearing a case together, making decisions together.
Okay.
And based on the studies of Japanese scholars, I think those lay judges have problems with, in principle, two issues.
Okay.
Number one, they feel like they have to be supervised most of the time. And it's always not easy to make a decision when you are sitting alongside an authority in law. And each of your decision-making process will have to be under the supervision of that authority. Meaning, you don't really have the elbow space to make the decision you want to make.
Okay.
You don't have the room to ask the questions you want to ask. So the so-called lay judges somehow is not really lay judges. It's more like assistant, endorser, or someone who's only sitting there to watch.
Okay.
So this is the first thing.
Right.
And the second thing is when you have to make a decision that's having to do with taking someone's life, liberty, or property away, but you would have to make this decision while being supervised, or you have your hands tied, I don't imagine it's going to be too good of an experience. I mean, in the jury system, you make the decision, and you are responsible for that. So when you arrive at a very serious decision or a verdict, taking someone's liberty for 25 years or guilty, you have good reasons for that. But in the lay judge system, I think the mindset is that, well, I have my hands tied, but then I'm making a decision that I don't think I should be fully responsible for, but I have to make it. So there's the complaint part of it.
Okay.
And the second part is that I think most of the lay judges in Japan, they're not too happy with the fact that they have to participate in the sentencing period, the sentencing phase.
Okay.
Because it gives them a sense of reality that they're taking someone's freedom away, and they have to be responsible. And I'm not sure if this is a cultural thing, but this is something that's adding a lot of pressure on the mindset and the mentality of those lay judges.
Okay, at least on the first account.
Yeah,
Leon, what you mentioned earlier about the lay judge, hands being tied and things, it certainly has taken place. In Japan, as we have seen since 2009.
I think so.
Yes. And we know, there's been a lot of discussions in Taiwan, in and out of the government, about continued judicial reform.
Yeah.
Therefore, in the civil society, there's been a number of NGOs and civic organizations formed to promote changes, possibly including the implementation of jury trial system and also lay judge system.
Yes.
And one of which is what we have learned, the Taiwan Jury Association. Leon, I know you're not a member of the association, but you have participated in some of the activities and events held by the association. By its name, we know its purpose to set up was to promote jury trial system in Taiwan. Can you tell us, from your experience as an association with them, what are some of the activities and events they have done, and what are some of the planned objectives that they would like to achieve in the coming years?
Okay. The Taiwan Jury Association was founded by Mr. Jerry Cheng with a bunch of co-founders in the year of 2014. And I mean, those are just great people. I mean, they're enthusiastic. They invested their own time, their own money in this social campaign, which they believe is beneficial for this country and democracy. For that, I actually admire them. Unfortunately, I'm not a member, but I think that somehow puts me in a more neutral position to comment on what they've done.
Okay.
And I think the purpose is for Taiwan Jury Association is quite clear. They are in for the promotion of the jury system. Okay. And they believe that the jury system is going to, help this democracy bring about more changes in terms of judicial reform. So this is what they believe. Okay. And their methods are actually very hands-on. They actually, based on my understanding, they would form different opportunities of seminars, international seminars, local seminars to discuss about the criminal justice system and the interaction of people's participation. And also, they would organize different trips, visit trips to, jury countries and lay judge countries. For example, there were trips to Hong Kong, to UK, and to the United States, different states, and to Germany as well. All right. So they actually take a very hands-on approach in observation of those things, and they write detailed reports.
All right.
And I remember last year they were working with the judicial yuan in certain mock trials, exercises, to implement, or say it's like a social experiment kind of thing. They implement the mock jury trial in Kaohsiung and in different cities, and the outcomes were great. I think those efforts were commendable. Those are excellent efforts.
All right, all right. And for some of the people that have participated in, for example, the mock trial and things, and do you know what were some of their responses and reactions after the event is over? Did they feel it was something refreshing? They felt it was something that Taiwan needs at this time? Or they felt, hey, it's just a waste of time. I didn't know the law enough. I wasn't a big part of it. I didn't think I gained anything from it. What was it?
Oh, based on my observation, actually it was very interesting. Prior to the participation of the mock trial, most of the jurors actually didn't like it because they have that mentality thinking that, well, why would I want to be a judge? This is responsibility. This is, use of my time. I don't want to do this, right? But when they got selected into the jury and started listening to all the rules, all the instructions and evidence, they got absorbed into the case.
Yes.
They started to deliberate in a very, very careful manner. And the discussions in the deliberation is just amazing. I mean, 12 citizens sitting down together, you have people from every single corner of the society. Talking, debating, using different evidence, citing different sources. It's just amazing. And when they walk out of the jury room, of the deliberation room, and handed down their verdict, afterwards, actually, we got to interview all of them. They were very happy with what they did. And they believe, number one, like you said, they've learned a lot. Number two, their entire perception was the legal system, especially the criminal justice system, has changed. Number three, they started to appreciate the efforts of the judges and the prosecutors and the defense attorneys. They started to realize that, well, this is not an easy job.
No,
it's not. Judges are working hard to do this. Think about this, and we're only doing one case. He has to do this every day. So I think those are positive changes. And those changes actually is probably going to be there for the rest of their life experiences. I think it's good.
Hopefully the changes can accumulate. So maybe one day the conditions are ripped, that we can see complete overhaul of the system.
Hopefully.
And finally, before we come to the end of the program, Leon, we have learned that you major, you were a double major in college. You major in psychology and political science, and now you are studying, in addition to holding a full-time job, you're studying for your doctorate in psychology. Let me ask you, how does the study and the pursuit of psychological principles has helped or made you a better prepared, a more accomplished practitioner of the law? By studying those principles that many other of your colleagues or peers may not be exposed to. What do you think?
I think the training in psychology actually has a huge influence on my practice. Because psychology is, in essence, a science. And in science, there are basic principles to be respected, to be upheld, to be, followed. For example, when you conduct an experiment or when you review a certain argument, you always go back there and look for the evidence.
Yes.
So everything in psychology has to be evidence-based. And that is something new for legal practitioners. I mean, we're both familiar with the profession. So you see a lot of arguments happening in the legal profession is coming from their positions.
Yes.
Well, I study in the United States, so I would argue that the United States is a better system. You study in Japan, so Japanese system is better. And he studied in probably Germany, so German system prevails. This is commonly what happened right now.
Yes.
But in psychology and the world of science, evidence speaks. This is why, in today's conversation, I'm constantly citing documents, papers, studies, or experiments that's been made. So this is the first thing. I try to do everything in a scientific manner by citing sources, by citing evidence, and try not to let myself be biased or blindfolded by my emotion or by my position. I mean, we all want to do that, but you have to keep neutral. The best we can do. And I think the second best influence is I learned to look at people in a very different way. In terms of psychology, we believe in a multi-factor model that actually having to do with people's behavior. We study behavior.
Yes.
And it's not just, why is a criminal? It's not just, you cannot just look at what he did at the moment. Life is a spectrum, it's a continuum. Something must have happened prior to the moment that actually pushed him into that position.
Yes.
I'm not saying that he's not responsible. I'm not saying that.
No.
Of course, he or she is responsible for what he or she has done. But to make the society a better place, we need to study what's behind it. That is why I was so outraged with the execution of Cheng Chieh. I know the fact that there is death penalty.
Yes.
I and my client, we both knew clearly that 99% of the chance he's going to receive death penalty.
Yes.
But the execution excludes everybody of the society from finding out more of what really happened. And think about this. He's actually from a normal family.
Yes. So, Leon, you have a lot of work ahead of you. It's certainly been a pleasure to have you on the program today.
Thank you,
I enjoy our conversation very much. And I want to wish you all the best in your future professional and personal endeavors.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Wu.
very much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for watching our program today. I'll see you next time on Mac Review Television. Thank you.